Imagine a clue, silent for 63 years, at an altitude of 7,000 meters. The official story, the one mountaineering history told for decades, was this. A wealthy amateur bought his spot on a K2 expedition, lost his footing, and was never seen again. But that's a lie. The glacier has finally given up a secret, one that transforms an unfortunate accident into a chilling thriller of betrayal and superhuman endurance. It turns out, he didn't fall. He waited as the death zone slowly claimed him. How did a single mitten shatter a myth that stood for over half a century? And who was this man, really? A glacier doesn't keep secrets forever. It releases them, slowly, millimeter by millimeter. And in 2002, it decided to reveal one of its darkest. Picture this. Researcher Jennifer Jordan trekking across the Godwin-Austen Glacier. Around her, nothing but ice, rock, and a deafening silence. And then, she spots something out of place. Bones, frozen into the ice, shreds of fabric worn away by time. But among these remnants of the past, one detail stands out, making her heart freeze. A thick, weathered mitten. And on it, stenciled in nearly faded ink, 5 letters. Wolf. It's a name from a legend. A name that, for decades, was synonymous with mystery. Nearby, fragments of expensive clothing. On a surviving label, the tailor's name is still visible. Cambridge. There was no doubt. It was him. This discovery wasn't just a final chapter. It was an explosion, shattering an old, deeply rooted myth. For decades, the mountaineering community was certain. Dudley Wolfe had gotten lost and fallen from a snow-covered slope. A swift, tragic, but understandable end. But the glacier tells a different story. The place where the remains were found wasn't at the bottom of a sheer cliff. It was right where his final camp had been. He didn't fall. He waited, alone, in or near his tent, staring down, waiting for a rescue that never came. And just like that, a single mitten rewrites the end of this drama and closes a 63-year-old investigation. So, who was he, this Dudley Wolfe? A wealthy adventurer chasing thrills at the edge of the world? Or a man running from something far more terrifying than a frozen abyss? To understand how he ended up alone in an icy trap on the slopes of K2, we need to rewind 43 years to 1896. Dudley Wolfe was born, as they say, with a silver spoon in his mouth. His mother was the heiress to the Smith mining empire, one of America's wealthiest families. Imagine a fortune that, today, would be valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. This wasn't just money. It was an entire universe of possibility, a world where any wish could be granted with the snap of a finger. Luxurious mansions, private tutors, trips across Europe. For young Dudley, this was just normal. It was the air he breathed. His world seemed as solid as the granite cliffs from which his family carved out their fortune. And at the center of this world was his father, an almost mythical figure. He presented himself to everyone as an English aristocrat, a man of impeccable manners and a heroic past. He'd spin these tales for his son, stories of hunting tigers in India, of his ties to British high society. He cultivated this aura of nobility and bravery. To young Dudley, his father was an idol, a role model, the very picture of honor and dignity. And the boy tried with everything he had to live up to that image, to be worthy of this larger-than-life father. But behind this glittering facade was a deception, a colossal lie that poisoned everything around it. The truth was, Dudley's father was no aristocrat. He was the son of a Jewish immigrant, a tobacco merchant from New York. All of his so-called aristocracy, all those stories. It was just a carefully crafted performance he'd been staging his entire life, a performance funded by his wife's fortune. He lived off her wealth, wearing a mask that had, over time, fused to his very skin. So, picture a young Dudley. The First World War is underway. He's serving his country, perhaps for the first time in his life, facing a reality where your family name means nothing. And it's there, so far from home, that the truth about his father finally hits him. The entire foundation of his world shatters in an instant. The man he had worshipped was a fraud. This revelation leaves a deep fracture in his soul. On one side, you have the very real immense wealth of his mother's lineage, and on the other, the fake, cardboard aristocracy of his father. This stark contrast breeds a gnawing insecurity within Dudley, a classic case of imposter syndrome. He's wealthy, but he feels like he doesn't deserve it. He feels that, just like his father, he's simply playing a part. And for the rest of his life, he would be on a desperate quest to prove to the world, and above all to himself, that he was the real deal, that he was worthy not just of his money, but of respect. This desperate need to prove his own authenticity becomes an E-Day fix for Dudley, a true obsession. And so, here it is, his first real chance to prove his worth in a world where his mother's money can't take the exam for you. He's sent to the prestigious Phillips Academy, which is basically a ticket to the big leagues, to Harvard, to the world of the real elite, the kind that isn't just bought and paid for. But this is where it all goes wrong. Dudley just can't keep up. He tries, he genuinely puts in the effort, but the academic work is just beyond him. His school record would even note, dismissed, despite his conscientious efforts. I mean, just think about that phrasing. He's not getting kicked out for being lazy or causing trouble. He's being kicked out simply because he can't do it. For a young man who spent his entire life trying to shed the imposter label, this is an absolutely crushing blow. It's as if the entire world is screaming at him, "Kid, you're a fake. You're just an empty package with a fancy bow." And it's right there, standing in the wreckage of his academic ambitions, that Dudley makes a decision that will define the entire course of his life. If his mind couldn't be his fortress, then his body would have to be. He starts to deliberately, methodically, push his body to its absolute limits, making discomfort his one and only ally. He's like a blacksmith, determined to hammer the soft metal of his character into something unbreakable, into steel, the cold, the hunger, the exhaustion. He welcomes them all like old friends. He's constantly looking for a way to test himself, to push his own limits, and then go even further. It becomes his new religion, his way of proving he's got what it takes. Little does he know, this path will lead him to the highest, coldest forge on earth, a place where the price of a mistake isn't getting expelled, but something far, far greater. Years go by. Dudley does, eventually, make it into Harvard. But he's 29 years old. Just picture it. He's sitting in a lecture hall, a graying, world-weary man, surrounded by fresh-faced kids a full decade younger than him. To them, he's a living curiosity, some strange, rich guy who missed the boat on his bright future. He doesn't try to fit in, doesn't join any fraternities. He stays on the social sidelines, in a self-imposed exile. His battlefield isn't the library or the lecture hall. His arena is the athletic field. He pours all of his immense energy into endurance sports, sailing, cross-country skiing. He finds his currency. And it's not the intellect that failed him, but endurance, the ability to keep going when everyone else quits. Every yacht race against a gale force wind, every grueling ski marathon. It's more than just a competition. It's his private war against his own ghost, against the shadow of the father who made him feel like a fraud. And Dudley Wolfe is willing to pay any price to win that war, but his personal battles on the athletic field are about to be dwarfed by a much bigger player entering the world stage, the First World War. Europe is on fire, and Dudley Wolfe sees not a tragedy, but his ultimate chance, a chance to earn real scars, real validation, not just another trophy from a regatta. He becomes obsessed with getting into the thick of it. In 1916, he tries to join the French Foreign Legion, the legendary outfit for desperate daredevils from all corners of the globe. And what happens? He's put on a waiting list. Even here, in this melting pot of misfits, it's like they're telling him, "Hang on, kid, you're not ready for this." It's another crushing blow to his ego. But he doesn't give up. When the United States enters the war, Dudley immediately heads to a recruitment office. He's wealthy, he's in peak physical condition, he's ready to serve, and he's rejected. The reason is almost comically humiliating: flat feet and poor eyesight. Can you imagine how he felt? The entire world is looking for able-bodied men to fight, and he, a man who spent years forging his body into an endurance machine, is deemed unfit for service. His own body, his last bastion of self-worth, has betrayed him. It's as if fate itself is laughing in his face, telling him he's just a counterfeit, a pale imitation of a real man. But when one door closes, Wolfe finds another. In 1917, He volunteers for the American Ambulance Field Service and ships out to the Italian front. He can't carry a rifle, but he can drive an ambulance. And just like that, he has a new arena. Picture the scene: narrow, winding alpine roads, completely exposed to enemy fire, and weaving through it all, to the soundtrack of exploding shells, is a clumsy tin can on wheels, a Ford Model T ambulance. At the wheel is a graying millionaire who could be safe in his Boston mansion. But instead, time and again, he drives directly into the chaos everyone else is desperately trying to escape. He's evacuating the wounded from the front lines, and every single trip is a game of Russian roulette. He isn't just doing his duty. He thrives on the danger. To him, the whistle of shrapnel overhead is like music, a symphony confirming that he's alive, that he's real. And he finally gets what he's been searching for. For his incredible bravery, the Italian High Command awards him the War Merit Cross. To Dudley, this small piece of metal is worth more than his entire family fortune. It's the first undeniable proof that he isn't just some empty suit. The war cements a dangerous pattern in his mind. He only feels whole, truly alive, when he's a hair's breadth away from death. A quiet, safe life is, to him, synonymous with being worthless. The real world, his world, is a place where it could all be over in a second. The war ends, and for Dudley Wolfe, a deafening silence descends. The roar of the cannons is replaced by the rustle of banknotes and the clinking of glasses at society parties. He's back in Boston, back in his gilded cage. The metal on his chest offers some warmth, but not for long. The adrenaline that had become the very air he breathed is gone, and he's starting to suffocate. He needs a new enemy, a new element to conquer, and he finds it in a place where humankind has only ever been a guest, the vast, furious ocean. He decides he will master the waves and forget about lazy days sailing on the bay. For Wolfe, yachting isn't a hobby, it's war, just with a different set of rules. He pours a fortune and all of his energy into ocean racing. This isn't just a sport, it's his own personal survival school. He commissions the best shipwrights of the day to build him a 60-foot schooner, the Mohawk. This is no elegant plaything for the wealthy. It's a true sea dog, built to cross the Atlantic, built to fight the storms. Then, in 1929, he does what no one had ever done before. He becomes the first in history to race across the Atlantic in a vessel of this class, throwing down the gauntlet to the icy winds and giant waves. Just picture it. A tiny nutshell of a boat in the middle of the roaring ocean, and at the helm, a man stubbornly guiding it forward, with nothing but the stars, a compass, and his own force of will to rely on. This victory is no fluke. He buys a new, even more advanced yacht, the Highland Light, and starts collecting prestigious trophies, snatching victories from the most experienced captains in the world. In these races, he proves to everyone, and most of all to himself, that he's not just some rich guy who bought an expensive hobby. He is a brilliant navigator, able to plot a course through the harshest weather imaginable. He's a natural-born leader whose crew is ready to follow him into the very heart of a storm. Out on the sea, his family name and his money mean nothing. Here, the only things that matter are endurance, knowledge, and courage. Out here, he's not a passive passenger in the car of his own destiny like he is on land. Out here, he is the captain. His word is law. His decisions are the thin line between triumph and an icy grave at the bottom of the ocean. He's tamed the Atlantic. And now, standing on the deck of his yacht, drenched in salt spray, Dudley Wolfe feels like he belongs for the first time in his life. He's found his element, and this taste of absolute control over chaos is intoxicating. He's proven to himself that he can win. And now, he's looking for a new, even more formidable opponent. At 37, most men are looking to settle down. Dudley Wolfe is looking for a new war. The ocean has been conquered, but that itch in his soul, that thirst for confrontation, hasn't gone away. And he finds his new enemy, inhospitable, silent, vertical. He finds the mountains. But here's the paradox. It's not another hardened veteran who leads him into this new, icy world, but his wife, Alice Damrosch. She's not just a New York socialite. She's an experienced, passionate skier. For her, the mountains aren't a battlefield, but a stage for an elegant dance with the elements. She's the one who convinces Dudley that true height isn't the crest of a wave, but a snow-covered peak, silently gazing down on the hustle and bustle of the world. And he, a man who loves a challenge, agrees. And so, the millionaire, the war hero, the record-breaking captain, becomes a student once again. They travel to Austria, to the legendary ski school of Hannes Schneider. Here, amidst the majestic alpine peaks, Wolf, a man used to giving orders, learns to listen. He trades the captain's bridge for a pair of skis and tries to tame his first slope, clumsily at first, then with growing confidence. And in the process, he discovers a new kind of addiction. He quickly realizes the mountains are not the ocean. Here, you can't just buy the best boat and hire a crew. This requires personal skill, something money can't buy. So, he chooses the only path available to him, the client guide approach. Imagine hiring the world's most reliable taxi to drive you down the most dangerous road. You're the passenger in an armored seat, and behind the wheel is a professional who knows every single turn. For Wolf, that driver is Otto Furrer, one of the best guides of his time. On his yachts, Wolf was the absolute master. In the mountains, he's just a wealthy client. He pays to be led. Together with Furrer, he undertakes incredibly difficult ski traverses in the Mont Blanc Massif, crossing glaciers and mountain passes. And this is where his greatest, almost superhuman strength is revealed. Wolf has a phenomenal physical engine. He can go for hours without tiring. His endurance is the envy of even seasoned guides. He's the perfect cargo, one that doesn't need to be carried. But there's a flip side to this coin, one that nobody notices at first. He's a powerful engine without a steering wheel. He can't read the ice, doesn't know how to secure a rope on a rock ledge, can't assess the risk of an avalanche. He is completely, utterly dependent on his guide. All of his decisions, from the choice of route to the moment they stop for a rest, are made by someone else. For a man who spent his entire life seeking total control, it's a strange, almost humiliating position to be in. He's standing at the foot of his new passion, strong as an ox, but as blind as a newborn kitten without someone else's eyes to see for him. He has learned how to be in the mountains, but he hasn't learned how to understand them. And this one detail, this critical reliance on others, it would eventually seal his fate. The dance with the elements, which began so beautifully, is coming to an end. And not on a mountainside, but in a courtroom. By 1938, his marriage to Alice, the very woman who had opened his eyes to the world of the peaks, falls apart. She, elegant and technically skilled, saw the mountains as art. He, obsessive and relentless, saw them as an enemy to be defeated. Their paths diverge. The mountains that were meant to be their shared world now become his private sanctuary, or perhaps a battlefield for a war against himself. Left alone with his passion, Wolf decides to prove to everyone, and most of all to himself, that he's not just some wealthy client. He is a mountaineer, and he sets his sights on the Holy Grail, Mont Blanc. Not just a ski traverse with the best guide, but a full-blown ascent. But something goes wrong. The weather? Maybe. But more likely it was something else. His navigator this time isn't so infallible, and Wolf's own internal compass is still silent. The expedition falters, and he's forced to turn back. Next up, an ambitious attempt to traverse Piz Palu in the Bernina Range. Another failure. These two setbacks, one right after the other, are like cracks in his facade of the invincible conqueror. They ruthlessly expose a truth his expensive guides had always managed to conceal. Dudley Wolf is incredibly strong, but technically weak. His incredible engine is still roaring, ready to carry him uphill forever. But without an experienced driver, without someone else's eyes and hands, all that power is useless. The machine just spins off the track at the very first sharp turn. And here's the amazing part. Every failure only seems to strengthen his reputation, but in a very particular way. In the tight-knit world of mountaineering, the word on him is this: that Wolf guy knows nothing about ropes or ice tools, but damn, can that man walk forever? Witnesses to his attempts tell stories of him breaking trail through deep snow for hours on end, never slowing his pace, while others were collapsing from exhaustion. He became known as a human machine, the ideal Sherpa, only with white skin and a bottomless bank account. His endurance became the stuff of legend, a myth retold in alpine huts. But no one was asking him to lead the rope on a difficult route. He was a valuable asset, but never a leader. As for Wolf himself, he feels a growing bitterness. The divorce has left a void, and the failed climbs only rub salt in the wound. He's not just looking for another peak to climb. He's looking for redemption. He needs a project on a titanic scale, a challenge so immense and dangerous it will consume him completely, make him forget everything else. He needs a mountain so vast that, against its backdrop, all his personal dramas and technical shortcomings would simply turn to dust. A mountain that wouldn't test his skill with knots, but his one true, almost supernatural power, the ability to just keep climbing until either the mountain ran out or he did. And soon, that very mountain would appear on his horizon. It wouldn't keep him waiting long, and it would arrive in the form of a man. In the world of mountaineering, there are names spoken with a certain reverence. And in the late 1930s, one of those names was Fritz Wiesner. German by birth, American in spirit, he was one of the greatest climbers of his era, technical, audacious, bordering on genius. And he had a dream, no, an obsession, that would have rivaled Wolf's own. He was putting together an American expedition to the second highest peak on the planet, a mountain known as the Savage Mountain, a summit so brutal it terrified even the most hardened climbers. He was going for K2. Wiesner had it all, the experience, the plan, a team of America's finest climbers. Everything except for one crucial thing: money. An expedition of this magnitude cost a fortune, and his budget was stretched to the breaking point. He needed an investor, a patron, someone to fill the gaping hole in his finances. And this is where their two worlds would collide. Picture the scene: a high society party in New York City, music in the air, champagne glasses clinking. Fritz Wiesner is likely scanning the room, not for interesting conversation, but for a backer. And then, his eyes land on Dudley Wolf. Wiesner didn't just see a wealthy heir in a fine suit. Like a seasoned coach, he was sizing up an athlete. He saw the broad shoulders, the powerful chest, that unmistakable aura of raw, physical power practically radiating from the man. To Wiesner, this wasn't just a man. He was a human powerhouse, the perfect engine for a high-altitude climb. He didn't know about Wolf's technical shortcomings in the Alps, but he saw exactly what he needed: endurance that seemed to be written into the man's very DNA. The conversation that followed would change everything. This wasn't a chat between two climbers sharing their love for the mountains. This was a transaction. Wolf, desperate to prove himself, saw K2 as his ultimate chance, his own personal Everest of redemption. He was ready to pay, and he paid handsomely. He didn't just make a donation, he essentially wrote a check for the lion's share of the entire expedition's costs, all for a single spot on the team. For Wiesner, it was a godsend. He wasn't just getting the money, he was getting what he'd spotted in Wolf from the very beginning: the perfect workhorse. The expedition leader was a pragmatist, through and through. He knew that at the crushing altitudes of K2, where the air is thin and the snow is waist-deep, it would be raw, primal strength that made all the difference. He didn't need another technical virtuoso. He had plenty of those. What he needed was a human engine, someone who could break trail for hours on end, haul heavy loads, and punch a path upward for the rest of the team. Wolf's role was set from the start, before they even left New York. He would be the expedition's muscle, its brute force on the vast snow-covered slopes. As for the technical details, the intricate rope work on sheer rock faces and ice walls, Wiesner would leave that to himself and the other seasoned climbers on the team. The deal is struck. Wolf has just bought the most expensive ticket of his life: passage on a ship, bound for the base of the world's most dangerous mountain. He's finally in the game. The only problem? He doesn't know the rules. The ship sets sail, and on board is the strangest orchestra you could ever imagine. And that's no exaggeration. The 1938 expedition had been like a chamber ensemble. Every member knew their part, perfectly in tune with the next, playing as one. But the 39 team was a motley crew of talented individuals who had never performed together. Many of them were meeting for the very first time. They weren't united by a shared spirit, but by Wiesner's checkbook and his personal invitations. They had no shared past, no history of triumphs and failures to bind them together, and the cracks were already beginning to show, long before they even reached the mountain, while they were still thousands of miles away. Wolf, despite being a newcomer to big league climbing, has the mind of a modern businessman. He's looking at the ordeal ahead, searching for a way to hedge his bets, and he identifies an obvious weak point: communication. He goes to Wisner with a brilliantly simple proposal. Fritz, this mountain is enormous. The camps are going to be hours, if not days apart. Let me buy the latest, lightest portable radios. We'll know what's happening with every team in real time. He's willing to spend even more of his own money to purchase safety and coordination. It's a no-brainer, right? Who could possibly say no? Wisner does, flat out. His answer is a slap in the face to common sense. Radios, that's unsportsmanlike. For him, a purist and a devotee of fair play, the mountain is an arena where a man faces the elements alone. Any technological assistance is cheating, a crutch that devalues the very essence of the ascent. He sees mountaineering as a chivalrous duel, not as a complex logistical operation. And this decision, tossed out so casually on the ship's deck, will become the very pebble that starts the avalanche. They are willingly plunging themselves into silence and blindness, with no idea of the terrible price they are about to pay. But the cracks in this expedition's foundation weren't just technical. They ran right through the men themselves. Wisner's second-in-command is Tony Cromwell, a man who looks like he was born with the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's a brilliant organizer, but at his core, a pessimist through and through. He's the kind of man who sees a storm cloud behind every cliff and always anticipates the worst possible outcome. His constant doubts and gloomy forecasts start to eat away at the team's morale like a quiet acid, long before the real climb even starts. And right alongside him is his polar opposite, Jack Durrance, young, ambitious, an incredibly powerful climber who's not used to taking a backseat to anyone. He watches Wisner's authoritarian style with obvious annoyance. Jack is used to a more democratic approach on the mountain, where tactics are discussed as a team. Wisner, on the other hand, is a dictator who doesn't tolerate being questioned. From the very first day, sparks fly between them. But this isn't the spark of friendship. It's a jolt of static electricity. Two alpha males, roped together, destined for conflict. And in this atmosphere, with this weight of internal friction, the team approaches the foot of K2. The mountain hasn't even shown its true colors yet, but the men are already drafting the blueprint for their own failure. And so, here they are. June, at the foot of the giant. That blueprint for failure, drawn up on the ship, is now starting to take on a very real stone-cold form. Base camp is set up, but the mountain doesn't wait for the official start. It begins its own ruthless casting call from day one. This isn't a competition between the men. It's their duel with the thin air, with the freezing wind, with their own bodies. And the first to fail this audition are the ones everyone was betting on, the young, strong, energetic Eaton Cranmer and Dudley Sheldon. You'd think they'd be dancing up the slopes, paving the way for the veterans. But instead, their bodies are in open rebellion. The altitude is draining the life from them. Their stomachs refuse to cooperate. Every step is an agonizing effort. The mountain, like a wise and cruel examiner, cuts them first, proving that youthful bravado isn't currency up here. So, what about the old guard? Wisner's deputy, the eternal pessimist Cromwell, and his constant opponent Durrance, seem to be carrying not just their packs, but the entire weight of their disagreements. They work slowly, with no fire. Their movements are precise, but passionless. They're professionals doing a hard job, but their fighting spirit was crushed before the real fight even began. And then, the most unlikely hero takes the stage, Dudley Wolfe, the same rich tourist many had written off as dead weight. While the young athletes battle nausea below and the veteran climbers argue in camp, Wolfe just grits his teeth and goes up. His endurance is astonishing. He isn't fast, he isn't graceful, but he's like a diesel engine, slowly, stubbornly, relentlessly pushing forward, hauling loads, setting fixed ropes. He's proving that willpower can be more important than well-trained muscles. And then, the inevitable happens. The team cracks at the seams. Wisner, seeing Wolfe as the only one who truly shares his obsession with the summit, forms a vanguard team. It's no longer a team, it's us and them. A summit party, made up of basically 2 men and a few porters, pushes for the top, while a demoralized and exhausted support group straggles somewhere far behind. The climbers and the stragglers. The distance between them is no longer measured in feet, but in days. And in this growing chasm, all information is lost. Remember Wisner's decision back on the ship? Radios are unsportsmanlike. Now, that phrase doesn't sound like a statement of principle. It sounds like a death sentence. The vanguard is blind and deaf to what's happening below, and base camp can only guess what's going on up there in the frozen silence. The tension thickens like fog before a storm, and no one knows when it will break. July 13th, 7,500 meters above sea level. The air up here isn't just thin, it feels brittle like shattered glass. Every breath is a chore, every exhale a small victory. Wiesner, Wolf, and a handful of the toughest Sherpas make it to Camp 7. This isn't just another campsite, it's the doorstep to the summit, the final staging ground before the last push. You can see it in their eyes, a mix of fanatical resolve and utter exhaustion. The world below doesn't feel real anymore. It's just a map, a pattern of valleys and ridges they've lost all connection to. They're living in the sky now. But it's a sky that doesn't welcome everyone. Right at this moment, a lone figure is slowly making his way down from Camp 7. It's Durrance. The mountain has passed its judgment. His oxygen-starved brain is screaming alarms. His head is splitting, his legs feel like lead, and the world is blurring around him. He has no choice but to turn back, and as he stumbles his way down, he casts one last look up. Tiny specks. That's all he can see of his teammates now. He watches until they vanish over an icy ridge, and then they're gone. The curtain has fallen. It's the last time anyone from the support team will see the summit party alive and well. Down at Camp 4, his arrival is like a bombshell. Alone? Why is he alone? Where are the others? Durrance, barely able to string two words together, tries to explain. They pushed on. They're fine. But his ravaged state tells a different story. And from that moment on, the support team begins the most agonizing part of any expedition. The wait. The complete and utter unknown. Their binoculars are useless now. The horizon is empty. They have no radio, no signal flares, no way of knowing what's happening up there in the frozen stratosphere. This is the moment their principles become a trap of their own making. They're at the foot of the mountain, but they might as well be locked in a stone cell, completely cut off, in an information vacuum. And high above, Dudley Wolf is having a terrifying realization. He's the only client, the only amateur, left this high on the mountain. He's no longer part of a big American team. He's a passenger, roped to an obsessed genius and a few impossibly strong men from another world. All his wealthy friends, his entire comfortable life, they're all in another universe now. Up here, it's just him, Wiesner, and the mountain. The mechanism for disaster, set in motion by their refusal to carry a radio, clicks into place with a deafening finality. Every passing minute of silence is now working against them. On K2, silence is no longer just the absence of sound. It becomes a character in this drama, the main antagonist. July 14th. The air here is a thief. It's not just thin, it steals your heat, drains your strength, and clouds your mind. But for Fritz Wiesner and Pasang Lama, this air is just another day at the office. They move with a methodical, almost inhuman efficiency. Every single movement is precise, perfected. They're packing gear for the final camp, Camp 8. Their target, a narrow ledge at nearly 8,000 meters, a place from which only one final push remains to the summit. They are a living machine, built for one single purpose. Dudley Wolf watches them, and he knows. He's made of completely different stuff. He tries to keep up. He gets to his feet, forces one step, then another. But his body is screaming no. His lungs feel like they're on fire, filled with shattered glass. His legs in their heavy boots feel like they're made of lead. Ahead of them isn't just a slope, it's a near-vertical ice chimney, demanding not so much raw endurance, but pure technical skill. A skill the exhausted Wolf simply doesn't have left. He stops, leaning on his ice axe, and just watches the backs of Wiesner and Pasang as they pull away. The expedition leader turns back. There's no blame in his eyes, no sympathy, just an acknowledgement of the facts. A slight nod. Nothing needs to be said. Wolf is staying behind. He turns back to the tiny tent at Camp 7, and now the true horror begins. He is officially alone, on an icy balcony at the top of the world, at an altitude of 7,600 meters. The silence up here isn't peaceful, it's oppressive. It presses in, squeezing his temples, a ringing in his ears. The wind whipping against the thin fabric of the tent is the only sound in this dead universe. Wolf crawls into his sleeping bag, but it no longer feels like a shelter. It feels more like a tomb. And this brings us to the most terrifying detail of his situation. He has no supplemental oxygen, not a single bottle. He's breathing the same toxic thin air that is slowly, cell by cell, shutting down his brain. His task is now laughably simple and terrifyingly complex: to wait. Just wait for Wiesner and Passang to return from the summit. He must not move. Conserve every calorie, every breath. He has to become a living statue. But waiting at this altitude isn't a passive process. It's an active battle against his own body, which is begging him to go down. Every hour spent up here is like a week of life down below. His thoughts become tangled, thick as tar. The past and the future blur together in a hazy fog of the present. He's no longer a wealthy American, no longer an adventurer. He is a sentry on duty, guarding the flickering flame of his own life. Every beat of his heart isn't a sound of life, but the ticking of a clock he didn't set. Day 1, day 2. Or is it day 3? Time moves differently here. It doesn't tick. It drips slowly, like water melting from an icicle. For Dudley Wolf, each sunrise and sunset isn't just the passing of another day. It's another small victory against the silence and the cold. His world has shrunk to the size of this tiny tent, and his entire universe, to the sound of his own breathing, ragged and shallow. The air is a liar. It's there, but it holds almost no life. His brain is starving, and his thoughts are turning into a thick sludge, where memories, plans, even his own name begin to sink. His greatest enemy now is thirst. It's a cruel paradox. He's surrounded by millions of tons of frozen water, yet he's dying of dehydration. To get a single cup of water, he has to melt a mountain of snow, and that takes energy, the very same energy his body is desperately trying to save, just to keep from freezing to death in his sleep. It's a vicious cycle. His body is a candle burning at both ends. The cold is leaching the heat from his skin, while the lack of oxygen and water is scorching him from within. He doesn't feel hunger, just this all-consuming, parching thirst and a dull, throbbing ache in his head. We have to understand. In 1939, this was an absolute, unimaginable record for survival. No one had ever spent this much time alone, this high up, in the death zone, without supplemental oxygen. Every hour he spends up here defies everything science knows about the human body. Wolf is past his limit. He's living on borrowed time, a debt owed to his own physiology. And somewhere up there, higher in this icy hell, Wiesner and Passang are still pushing on. Or are they? Wolf has no idea. He's completely cut off. For all he knows, they could be on the summit right now, celebrating their triumph. Or they could have fallen into a crevasse days ago. The not knowing is more crushing than the thin air itself. Any news would be better than this vacuum. Any sign, a shout, anything. But there's nothing. Only the wind. So why doesn't he go down? His survival instinct must be screaming at him, begging him to crawl back down, back to life. But he doesn't budge. He gave his word. He's waiting for his leader. This loyalty, this sheer stubbornness. It's the only thing giving his existence any meaning. 7 days have passed. 7 endless cycles of light and dark. Dudley Wolf is no longer the American millionaire. He has become a living monument to human will, frozen in place at 7,600 meters. Meanwhile, just a few hundred meters above him, the final act of another drama is unfolding. July 19th. Fritz Wiesner and Passang Lama are standing at 8,370 meters. The top of the world is just 240 meters away. That's less than the height of the Eiffel Tower. They can see it. They can almost taste it. Victory is so close, it feels like they could just reach out and touch the sky. And ahead of them, a fork in the path, a choice that will decide everything. To the left, a wide, relatively safe ice couloir. It's a straight shot, a clear path, like a snowy highway leading right to the summit. To the right, a steep, nearly vertical wall of rock, known as the Rock Bastion. It's technically difficult, dangerous, but for a climber of Wiesner's caliber, it's incredibly tempting, and he makes his choice. He turns right towards the rock face. Why? Maybe it was pride, a desire to climb the route clean, to take the hardest line and prove his absolute mastery over the mountain. He's a purist, a true alpinist, not just some snow plotter. For him, it's not just about getting to the top, it's about how you get there. Pasang looks at his leader, a silent question in his eyes. His experience, his Sherpa's intuition, is screaming at him that the snow is the right way to go. It's faster, it's safer. But the word of the Sahib, the expedition leader, is law. He silently follows Wisner onto this vertical rock puzzle. They're losing precious time. The rock is more treacherous than it looked. Every meter is a struggle, and the sun is already sinking towards the horizon, painting the ice peaks in shades of crimson. The clock is ticking. Wisner knows they're not going to make it. To keep climbing means descending in the total darkness, which is basically a death sentence. With a heavy heart, he makes the call to turn back. 240 meters. Just 240 meters separated him from eternal glory. Imagine that disappointment, that bitterness. They begin their descent, exhausted and demoralized. And then, something happens that completely shatters their dream. On a tricky section of the climb, Pasang slips. He manages to catch himself, but in that split second, his crampons, the metal spikes for gripping the ice, tear away from his boot. A single sharp clang of metal against rock, and they vanish into the bottomless abyss. That's it. It's over. Without crampons, another attempt on the ice couloir is impossible. The mountain transforms into an unassailable ice slide, with only one way to go: down. Now, their goal isn't the summit of the world, but a tiny tent far below, the tent where Dudley Wolfe has been waiting for them for 9 days. Their long, agonizing descent began. 2 days. 2 agonizingly long days coming down. Every meter they had fought so hard to win from the mountain on the way up now had to be surrendered. But this time, they weren't filled with strength and hope. They were running on empty, with frostbitten fingers and a hollow feeling inside. Their entire world had shrunk to the crunch of snow beneath their feet, the ragged breaths that burned their lungs, and one single thought: get to the tent. Get to Dudley Wolfe. July 21st. Out of the white emptiness, 2 figures finally emerge. Wolfe, ravaged by 9 days of solitude and the crushing altitude, watches Wisner and Pasang approach. You can see the hope warring with anxiety in his eyes, but one look at their slumped shoulders and bowed heads tells him everything he needs to know. They didn't reach the summit. Inside the cramped tent, a heavy silence falls. The news of the failed attempt, and even worse, the lost crampons, is a death sentence. Their supplies are nearly gone. Their strength is too. To stay here is to die. There's only one option: down. Down to Camp 7. That's where safety lies. Just imagine it. In their minds, they're already there. They can almost feel the warmth of sleeping bags, taste hot food, feel the security of a solid tent. Camp 7 is more than just a point on the map. It's their promised land, an oasis of life in the middle of this frozen desert. The next day, July 22nd, the trio begins the most difficult leg of their journey. Wolfe is so weak he can barely move. Wisner and Pasang, hardly able to stay on their own feet, are essentially carrying him. This isn't a descent. It's a slow, desperate evacuation. And then, through a fog of exhaustion, they see it. The yellow dot of a tent at Camp 7. Hope fuels them for one last push. They practically collapse into the camp, expecting to see signs of life, to hear their friends' voices. But something is wrong. There's a ringing, unnatural silence. No one comes out to meet them. Wisner, shaking off a terrible feeling, approaches the first tent. He throws back the flap and freezes. It's empty, completely. No sleeping bags, no cooking stove, not a single crumb of food. He rushes to the second tent and finds the exact same scene. It's all gone. Someone took everything. This isn't just disappointment. It's a gut punch. It's as if someone yanked the lifeline away the very second they reached for it. They're alone, no food, no warm gear, at 7,500 meters. The mountain has just slammed its ice trap shut. This is no longer a difficult situation. It's a catastrophe. And the clock on their survival has just started ticking down. How could this have happened? To understand this chilling mistake, We need to travel down from 7,500 meters, all the way to base camp, away from the icy hell where Wiesner, Wolf, and Pasang are trapped, and into the relative comfort and safety at the mountain's foot. Down there, Dudley Cromwell, the expedition's deputy leader, is waiting. With him is Jack Durrance. For over a week, they've been scanning the silent slopes of K2. Day after day, they scan the ice fields and rock ledges through their binoculars, searching for any hint of movement, any sign at all. But the mountain remains silent. In their world, the world of 1930s mountaineering, a week of silence at that altitude means only one thing. The party is never coming back. The hope that flickered for the first few days has been extinguished, replaced by a grim certainty. They have no idea that Wiesner and Pasang were a hair's breadth from the summit. They don't know that Dudley Wolf fought for his life alone in the high camp for 9 days. All they know is the silence. And so, the game is over. Cromwell makes a decision that is harsh, pragmatic, and in his mind, the only one that makes sense. He gives the order to the Sherpas, start clearing the camps. The official reason sounds almost absurd, to salvage valuable equipment, especially the sleeping bags. Sleeping bags? In his mind, he's writing off the men he already considers lost, just to save some down in fabric for expeditions to come. Perhaps the final straw is Durrance's report. He'd been sent up on a reconnaissance mission, tasked with spotting the signals Wiesner was supposed to be leaving in the snow. What did Durrance see? Or what did he think he saw? To this day, historians debate whether he simply couldn't make out the signals in the poor visibility, or if he misinterpreted them. But his verdict, when he reported back to Cromwell, was final. There's no one up there, and the Sherpas obey. They're just following orders. They were told to clear the camps, and they do it with a terrifying efficiency. They don't just take the sleeping bags, they take it all. The stoves, the food, the medical supplies. Camp by camp, they methodically wipe every island of life left for the descending party right off the face of the mountain. They have no idea that every camp they dismantle is another door to survival being nailed shut for their teammates. That single decision, made in the relative safety of base camp, becomes a death sentence for the men still high on the mountain. Without even realizing it, Cromwell had just cut the rope that tied Wiesner, Wolf, and Pasang to the world of the living. The K2 catastrophe isn't a story of a mountain-conquering man. It's a tragedy set in motion by a single, terrible decision. A fatal misreading of the silence. A chain of fateful coincidences and human error had finally snapped shut, leaving 3 climbers trapped in the desolate Camp 7, a prison built for them, unwittingly, by their own teammates. And so, we're back up high, in the icy hell of Camp 7. After their desperate descent, Wiesner and Pasang came back to Wolf, not triumphant, but empty-handed. They peer into the tent, and what greets them isn't a triumphant friend, but a man whose spirit seems to have been left behind. Somewhere up there, on the final ridge to the summit, just imagine, 3 exhausted men huddled in a single thin tent at nearly 8,000 meters. The night of July 23rd into the 24th. They have no sleeping bags, no food, no strength. An icy cold seeps into their bones, turning the thin fabric of the tent not into a shelter, but a freezer. Every gust of wind feels like a physical blow. No one sleeps that night. They just lie there, listening to the howl of the wind and the sound of their own ragged breaths, trying to hold on to whatever warmth is left. By morning, the fog of hopelessness has only thickened. Fritz Wiesner looks at Dudley Wolf. He sees not just a friend, not just the expedition's sponsor. He sees 90 kilograms of dead weight that needs to be brought down the sheer cliffs known as the Black Pyramid. And Wolf. He has this vacant stare. He's completely apathetic. It's not just exhaustion, it's something deeper, a kind of soul-deep fatigue where the body refuses to obey the mind because the will itself has simply vanished. He can't take a single step on the treacherous terrain. Wiesner, a master climber, assesses the situation with cold clarity. He looks at Wolf, then runs the route down in his mind, the ice couloirs, the razor-sharp rocks. They have neither the strength nor the equipment to manage a safe descent for a man in his condition. To try and bring him down now would be a death sentence for all 3 of them. It's a simple, brutal equation of survival, and there are no good answers. And so, Wiesner makes the most terrible decision of his life. It's July 24th. He and Paesong Lama have to go down, alone, to leave Wolf here in this frozen tomb, to get down as fast as they can and return with help, with Sherpas, with ropes, with hot tea. He goes to Wolf and, what can you even say in a moment like that? He makes a promise. He swears he'll be back. Hang on, Dudley. We'll get down and bring back help. We're coming back for you. Maybe Wolf nods, or maybe he just stares right through Vesner, no longer connected to reality. And with that, Wiesner and Paesong Lama step out of the tent, check their gear one last time, and begin their descent. And Dudley Wolf is alone once more, alone in an empty tent, surrounded by silent giants, with nothing but a promise to cling to as his only hope for rescue. For him, time slows to a crawl, waiting for the sound of footsteps in the snow. But for Wiesner, it's racing against him, because now every minute of delay is literally stealing the life from his friend. Every step Wiesner and Paesong take on their way down is a desperate race against time. They're not just descending, they're practically flying down the icy slopes, haunted by the image of Dudley Wolf, trapped in his icy prison. A single thought pounds in their minds. Get to the lower camps, where their teammates, warm sleeping bags, and a hot meal are waiting. They're picturing it all. They'll quickly put together a rescue team and head straight back up. But when they finally reach Camp 6, pushed to their absolute limit, they're met with a deafening silence. The tents are empty. The sleeping bags and stoves they had left for the descent are gone. Someone has taken them. This isn't just a mistake, it's a catastrophe. Their entire plan, built on the assumption of support from below, has just crumbled. Instead of the sanctuary they were dreaming of, they've found an icy wasteland. And Wiesner realizes with dawning horror, no one is waiting for them. They've been given up for dead. And just like that, the rescue mission has turned into a desperate fight for their own survival. The promise they made to Wolf now seems impossible to keep. But hope isn't completely lost. After making it all the way down to base camp, barely able to stand, Wiesner explains what's happened. And this is where we witness a true miracle of the human spirit. On July 28th, upon hearing of Wolf's desperate plight, 3 Sherpas, Pasang Kikuli, Finsu, and Tsering Norbu, step forward without a moment's hesitation. They will go up. This isn't just another climb, it's a plunge into the unknown. They know the odds are slim, but for these men, duty and honor are not just empty words, and they pull off something incredible. In a single day, the 3 of them ascend from base camp to just below Camp 7, gaining about 2,000 meters in elevation. To put that in perspective, that's like scaling the Empire State Building more than 4 times, one after the other. But they're doing it in the thin, oxygen-starved air on near vertical slopes. Their movement is a single, pulsing vein of hope on the lifeless body of the mountain. And then, they reach their goal. They approach the tent, from which there is almost no sound, and they peer inside. The sight that meets their eyes is one they will never forget. Dudley Wolf is alive. That's the first thing they register. And it's a miracle. But he's in a terrible state. There's no food left. He's just sitting in the tent, alone, in a state of total apathy, surrounded by the signs of his days of solitude. The air inside is heavy, foul. The Sherpas try to talk to him, offering the hot tea they brought with them. They notice Wolf can't even tie the laces on his boots. His fingers refuse to cooperate, and his will seems to have completely abandoned him. He looks at them with a blank, empty gaze. They tell him, "Let's go. We'll help you down. We need to leave right now." But in reply, they hear a quiet, lifeless voice. Wolf asks them to leave him and come back tomorrow, to just wait for the morning. For him, time has stopped. He no longer understands that every moment spent here is a step closer to the abyss. To the Sherpas, his request sounds like a death sentence. They can't stay the night at this altitude without gear, and so, bowing to the incomprehensible logic of a dying man, they make a decision. They will descend to Camp 6 to spend the night, and return for him in the morning. They leave him food and they go, taking with them a terrible sense of foreboding. July 29th. The morning greets the rescuers with an icy breath, and the sky over K2 is suspiciously clear, almost unnaturally pristine. 3 Sherpas, Pasang Kikuli, Pasang Kitar, and Finsu, are heading back up the mountain. This isn't just a job for them. They're going to save a man whose life is now entirely in their hands. In their packs, they carry food, warm gear, and the last glimmer of hope for Dudley Wolfe. Every step upward is a step into the unknown. They know full well the immense risk they're taking, heading back into a zone where life hangs by a thread. But for them, turning back would mean betraying not just a client, but their own honor. These are men for whom the mountains are more than a job. They're a part of their very soul. And up here, the code of honor is etched into the glaciers themselves. They're climbing because, for them, there is no other choice. And among them, one man stands out, Pasang Kikuli. He's not just an experienced guide, he's a living legend. 5 years earlier, in 1934, he was on Nanga Parbat during the horrific tragedy that claimed 9 lives. He was one of the very few who managed to escape the icy grip of the killer mountain. He's seen the mountains take the very best. He knows the price of a single mistake. His presence here, on the slopes of K2, gives the others a sense of confidence. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's him. He's a walking symbol of resilience, a man who has stared into the abyss and forced it to back down. It feels as though his experience, his luck, will be a shield for the entire team. But K2 is not Nanga Parbat. This mountain has its own rules, and it keeps its own score. Down below, in the lower camps, the others watch, their eyes fixed on 3 tiny specks against the vast white slope. The hours tick by. The figures crawl slowly, steadily upward, getting closer to the shelter of the tent at Camp 7. And just then, the mountain decides to show its true face. From the west, a white haze begins to roll in. At first, it's just a light mist. Then, thick, heavy clouds that cling to the rocks like a predator stalking its prey. The wind, which had been just a whisper, begins to howl, quickly escalating into a roaring gale. The storm has arrived. Those watching from below see the 3 specks reach the ice ridge near the camp, and then they're gone. They simply vanish into the churning white chaos. No one would ever see them again. Hours of waiting stretch into days, but not a single dark shape appears on the slope. The storm rages for days, wiping away any trace of them, burying every possible path. When the weather finally breaks, the mountain slope is empty. Blank. Dudley Wolfe, Pasang Kikuli, Pasang Kitar, and Finsu had vanished without a trace. The mountain had claimed them. The loss of 3 of the finest Sherpas of their time sends a shockwave through the entire climbing community. It was an irreplaceable loss. They weren't just guides. They were keepers of unique experience, of immense courage, and an unbelievable dedication to their craft. Their names are forever etched into the icy history of K2, a symbol of a sacrifice that was ultimately powerless against the blind fury of the elements. The 1939 tragedy was over. The mountain had taken its final, cruelest toll. The mountain falls silent, its price paid. But down below, in the world of men, a new and no less vicious storm is brewing, a storm of accusations, rumors, and half-truths. And when Fritz Wiesner, exhausted and utterly broken, finally makes his way down, he is not met with sympathy. Instead, he's met with a wall of ice-cold hostility. The main accuser is Jack Durrance, backed by the expedition leader, Dudley Cromwell. Their story is simple, and it's devastating. Wiesner, obsessed with the summit, left his client for dead. He was the one to blame. And so begins a quiet war, fought on paper. The American Alpine Club, an elite organization that both Cromwell and Durrance were part of, is faced with a choice: admit to systemic failures in the expedition's planning, or find a single person to blame. The choice was obvious. Wiesner, with his German accent and no-nonsense attitude, was the perfect scapegoat. The official expedition report is a carefully crafted document, designed to protect the reputation of the club and its members. Facts are twisted, blame is shifted, and for decades, the name Fritz Wiesner becomes synonymous with recklessness and selfishness. His brilliant near-successful ascent is wiped from the history books, replaced by the image of a man who led his companions to their deaths. And what about Dudley Wolfe? In this new official version of the story, he's cast in a very unflattering role. He's painted as a wealthy tourist, a spoiled amateur who bought his way onto the expedition and became a liability for the real professionals. The story goes that he was weak, unprepared for the mountain, and that his presence was a mistake from the very start. It's a convenient narrative for everyone involved. It absolves those who abandoned the high camps and those who were slow to send help. After all, why risk your life for a man who only has himself to blame? And so, for years, Wolf becomes a caricature, a cautionary tale for other wealthy adventurers with mountain dreams. But facts are stubborn things, and they tell a very different story. Let's just look at the numbers. Dudley Wolf spent 38 days above an altitude of 7,000 meters, 38 days in the zone where the human body is slowly dying. He survived multiple storms, all alone, in a tiny tent pinned to an icy slope. Where's the weakness in that? Where's the amateur? These are signs of incredible, almost superhuman endurance. He survived where many seasoned climbers would have given up. He wasn't a victim of his own physical weakness, but of a total collapse of the support system. The chain of communication and supply that was meant to be his lifeline had snapped. He was left alone, not because he was weak, but because down below there was chaos, indecision, and maybe even some personal scores to settle. And then, 63 years later, in 2002, the mountain itself decided to reveal a piece of the truth. Climbers Jennifer Jordan and Eric Meyer discovered the remains of Camp 7. Among the tattered remains of a tent, some bones, and old equipment, they found a mitten. A simple woolen mitten that belonged to Dudley Wolf. This discovery, this small object from the past, does more than any official report or investigation ever could. It gives Dudley Wolf back his humanity. He's no longer just the wealthy tourist from the official accounts. He becomes a person again, the man who fought for his life to his very last breath, in one of the harshest places on the planet. This mitten is a silent testament to his courage, and to a tragedy that turned out to be far more complex than the official story would have you believe.